Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and I too rise to speak on the Regulatory Legislation Amendment Reform Bill of 2023. And of course, as we know by now, this is an omnibus bill that consists of over 50 reforms across 14 acts and 10 ministerial portfolios. While many of these reforms appear to be a collection of relatively simple and straightforward reforms, continuous fine-tuning of the legislation is essential to the Victorian Government's vision of a high-performing state and local regulatory system that supports increased productivity, makes it easier to do business in Victoria, protects consumers, community health, safety and our environment, of course. And it's this continuous fine-tuning that continues to underpin Victoria's growing economy, which continues to grow at the fastest rate in the nation, which you wouldn't know about it if you just heard and listened to the other side all the time. As announced on the 30th of January 2024 by the Treasurer and, of course, the member for Werribee in his capacity, the Deloitte Access Economics Business Outlook report released last week showed that the Allan Labor government's strategy for sustainable job-creating growth is working. The report forecasts Victoria's growth across all state products in 23-24 will be 2.5%, outpacing all other states and territories. And Victorian economic growth will lead all states over 5 years to 2027-28 at an average annual rate of 2.3%. The report, Deputy Speaker, also showed Victoria's strong economy has enabled job creation and employment levels just shy of the all-time high achieved last year of 3.68 million Victorians in work. The report expects Victorian household consumption to also grow by 1.3% in 2024, outpacing the national forecast of 1.1%. And fundamentally, the Deloitte Access report showed that our economic strategy is growing jobs, it is keeping local communities strong, and it is encouraging businesses to invest and expand their workforces. And indeed, Deputy Speaker, it is the reforms contained in this bill, as well as through the other various economic, budgetary and policy approaches, that continues to support and foster a positive economic outlook for business, workers and communities across our state. Indeed, if this wasn't the case, we wouldn't be able to be providing the economic environment for the kick-starting of business, jobs and cultural revitalisation opportunities through my community in Central Coburg. And in this respect, I would like to draw the House's attention to the media coverage of The Age newspaper of the 27th of January 2024 by Tom Cowie and of December 3rd, 2023 by Royce Miller, both of which respectively featured and highlighted the incredible once-in-a-generation opportunities currently on the horizon for Central Coburg revitalisation. Building off the record state investments into Central Coburg, which include the world-class new Coburg and Moreland train stations, the removal of 4 level crossings along the Upfield line, of course, at Moreland Road, Reynard Street, Munro Street and Bell Street, the delivery of a new landmark active transport, cycling and walking and open space corridor, investment into local schools, including the $22.5 million to build a brand new Coburg Special Development School and the $17.8 million for a new Coburg Technology Hub, the $6 million to redevelop Coburg City Oval. All of these combined, Deputy Speaker, are working to drive local revitalisation efforts to enhance local ambience and amenity, to attract new investment and businesses through Central Coburg, the Sydney Road and the Upfield Corridor. And indeed, this approach, along with our broader regulatory reforms, are creating dividends for local businesses and my local community. Again, as featured in The Age, the unlocking of the new Pentridge Visitor and Entertainment Precinct is very much at the heart of what is becoming a new chapter for Melbourne's northern creative, cultural, events, tourism and business sectors. And I'm glad that the Minister's in the chair, the Minister for Tourism, who's visited on a couple of occasions already and seen it firsthand for himself. Indeed, Pentridge's Northern Common Restaurant, the former prison mess hall in the Old B Division, which has been recognised by The Age's Good Food Guide as Coburg's first ever hatted restaurant, a world away from when some of the state's most infamous names would have been lining the hall for breakfast, lunch and dinner. The Pentridge precinct is already drawing international, interstate and intrastate tourists on a daily basis. The tours are absolutely phenomenal, Deputy Speaker, in unprecedented numbers to Coburg as they spend an unforgettable night in Pentridge and have the opportunity to experience the Sydney Road Corridor. And in this respect, I would also like to acknowledge and commend the Coburg Traders and Business Association, who continue to do a commendable job in advocating and promoting the interests of local traders, and whom I've previously engaged with, and include Ray Jacobs, the Secretariat, Brett O'Reilly, the Chair from True North Cafe, Caspar Zika, the Treasurer from VicSeg New Futures, Donna Stoddart from the Brotherhood of St Lawrence, Con Pavlidis from the National Australian Bank Branch, Leanne Berger, formerly of Pictures and Pages, which is now owned by the wonderful local mum Leanne Jiang, and many others. One of the newest businesses that I did recently have the pleasure to officially open on the 25th of November in central Coburg, alongside the member for Essendon and the member for Broadmeadows, was Fresh on Young Food Hall in Louisa Street in central Coburg. An amazing family-run local business by Tony and David Abuzaid and Lee. Fresh on Young does provide locals with some of the freshest agricultural produce from right across the state, and has also played a key role in helping reinvigorate central Coburg's food and cultural offerings. All of these food businesses who will be particularly interested in the various reforms contained in this bill as they relate to the Food Act of 1984, the Meat Industry Act of 1993 and the Seafood Safety Act, Deputy Speaker. But along with these businesses in central Coburg, my municipality of Marybeck is also home to a real wide array of local businesses who will also be interested in the many other of the 50 regulatory process reforms contained in this bill that are designed to continue underpinning and streamlining regulations for businesses across the state. My community of Marybeck is home to over 16,700 local businesses that have grown by 1,784 businesses since 2021-2022. So we're growing business and jobs-wise also in Marybeck, Deputy Speaker, despite the claims of those opposite. My local businesses consist of 16% construction businesses, 14.8% of transport and warehousing businesses, and I particularly like to acknowledge the Transport Workers Union, who do such a magnificent job in representing many of those transport and warehousing workers across Melbourne's north. 13.6% of my businesses are in professional and scientific sectors, 8.8% are in rental, hiring and real estate services, 7.2% are in retail trade, 6.8% are in health and social services, a huge sector in my community, 5% are in accommodation, food services and the visitor economy, 3.2% are manufacturers, 3% are in the arts, creative and recreational industries, 3% are in financial and insurance services, and of course 2% are in education and training. These businesses collectively help contribute over $7 billion in gross regional product and represent almost 1.5% of the overall state's gross product. And of course, there are a wide number of reforms that are contained in this bill, many of which I could go to and tie directly into many of those different local business sectors. Because as I said, there's 50 different pieces of reforms contained in this bill, over 14 acts and 10 ministerial portfolios. And the Department of Treasury and Finance estimates that these reforms will provide over $2.6 million in annual savings to businesses across Victoria, including many of those that I mentioned earlier, by removing licensing and permit fees and making regulatory compliance easier. For example, the bill will modernise and streamline requirements for businesses and social service providers, including through the Drugs, Poisons and Controlled Substances Act, where the Secretary from the Department of Health would have the capacity to authorise a health service or another type of health entity to obtain, possess or otherwise deal with medicines where this is considered appropriate and does not create risk. And on that note, I really would like to acknowledge Mary Community Health. They're one of the biggest and longest lasting community health providers who do an absolutely fantastic job. They're actually the biggest, if not the biggest employer in the Marybeck municipality, employing over 500 community social and health workers, and this reform may potentially go directly to supporting their work. The bill will also reduce the regulatory burden for businesses to sell dried meat, as we've heard previously in the food sector, and the bill does include an amendment which will clarify that the Meat Industry Act of 1993 does not apply to the online sale of dried meat, which the Act was never intended to do, ensuring that online retailers are treated the same way as bricks and mortar retailers, both being of low risk to consumers. The bill also streamlines the licensing requirements in the Meat Industry Act of 1993, the Seafood Safety Act of 2003, and recognises that refrigerated vehicles are often used to transport multiple commodities. Issuing one type of licence to transport meat and seafood will reduce the regulatory burden on businesses and transporting of both products. And that'll be a win also for Transport Workers Union members and drivers. Currently also under the Social Services Regulation of Act of 21, registered social service providers must also notify social services regulator about changes to information on providing registration. And while in a business sense, health and social services in my community rank at about, from memory, 3 or 4% that I cited earlier, in a workforce point of view, health and community and social workers are the highest employment sector in my community. Around 15% of my local residents are employed in the health and social services sector, so I'll really appreciate that particular reform being implemented through the business community too. The bill will also improve safety compliance and improve food safety for Victorian consumers by amending the Food Act, and again will also be welcomed by many of those food, hospitality, but also food manufacturers, the growing food manufacturing base in my community, particularly through the Newlands Road and North Coburg corridor, which are making the very most of that beautiful, wonderful regional Victorian agricultural produce that is transported to northern Melbourne in my community and then value added through the work of local workers in those food hubs and food factories. And on that note, I commend the bill to the House.